The iron shackles bit into Ilara's wrists as she stood on the wooden platform, her heart hammering against her ribs like a caged bird, desperate for freedom. The jeering crowd below blurred into a sea of cruel faces, their voices rising and falling, like waves against a rocky shore. She had been here before, in nightmares that jolted her awake in the cramped quarters of the merchant's ship. But this was real. This was happening. Lot 47, the auctioneer bellowed, his voice cutting through the humid afternoon air. Young, healthy, trained in household duties. Bidding starts at 50 gold pieces. Ilara's eyes swept across the crowd, searching for anything that might offer hope. Wealthy merchants in silk robes examined her like livestock, their calculating gazes making her skin crawl. Plantation owners whispered among themselves, nodding appreciatively at her apparent strength. A few noble women fanned themselves lazily, seemingly bored by the proceedings. Then she saw him. Standing at the back of the crowd, partially hidden by a stone pillar, was a man unlike the others. He wore simple brown leather and rough-spun cloth, his dark hair tied back with a leather cord. While others shouted their bids with enthusiasm, he remained perfectly still, his deep green eyes fixed not on the auctioneer, but on her face. There was something in his expression, not the hunger she saw in the others, but something else entirely. Sorrow, recognition, she couldn't tell. 60 gold pieces. Someone shouted, double quotes, 70-5. 100. The bidding escalated rapidly. Ella forced herself to stand straighter, to meet each gaze with defiance rather than desperation. She had been the daughter of a respected healer once, before the raiders came, before her village burned, before she became property instead of a person. 200 gold pieces. The voice belonged to Marcus Valerius, a notorious slave trader, whose reputation preceded him like a dark cloud. Ilara's blood ran cold. She had heard whispers about his estates, about the servants who entered but never left. The crowd fell silent. 200 was more than most would pay for a single slave, no matter how skilled. Going once, the auctioneer called out. The quiet stranger stepped forward, his movement so subtle that only Ilara noticed at first. He raised his hand not dramatically, not with flourish, but with the quiet certainty of someone who had already made his decision. 500 gold pieces. The crowd erupted. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the assembly like wind through wheat. Marcus Valerius spun around, his face twisted with fury as he searched for the source of the bid. Even the auctioneer seemed stunned, his hammer frozen mid-air. 500 gold pieces. The stranger repeated, his voice carrying despite its quiet tone. And I'll pay in silver, not promises. Ilara's knees nearly buckled. 500 gold pieces was more than her father had made in 5 years as a healer. It was enough to buy a small farm, or a merchant's shop, or a dozen skilled slaves. Who was this man? And why was he willing to pay such a fortune for her? Marcus Valerius raised his hand. 600. Without hesitation, the stranger replied, 1,000 gold pieces. The silence that followed was deafening. Even the birds seemed to stop singing. Ilara stared at the man who had just changed her fate with a few simple words, wondering if she had been saved or simply traded from one form of captivity to another. The transaction happened quickly after that. Marcus Valerius stormed away, his face purple with rage, while other bidders shook their heads in disbelief. Ilara watched in stunned silence as her mysterious benefactor approached the auctioneer's table with a leather pouch that clinked heavily with silver coins. The name is Kai Thornfield, he said simply, counting out the extraordinary sum without apparent concern. And I'll be taking her now. The auctioneer's eyes gleamed with greed as he examined each coin. Pleasure doing business with you, Master Thornfield. She's all yours. Ilara's chains were unlocked with a key that felt heavier than the shackles themselves. She rubbed her raw wrists, hardly daring to believe the iron was truly gone. Kai Thornfield stood nearby, patient and quiet, making no move to grab her or assert his ownership as she had expected. Come, he said softly. We have a long ride ahead of us. She followed him through the crowd, acutely aware of the stares and whispers that followed their path. His horse was a magnificent black stallion, but beside it stood a second horse, a gentle-looking mare with kind eyes and a comfortable saddle. You can ride? He asked, offering her the reins. Ilara nodded, too surprised to speak. Most masters would have bound her and thrown her across a pack animal like cargo. Instead, he was offering her a horse as fine as his own. The first few miles passed in silence. Ilara kept glancing at Kai, trying to understand what manner of man would spend 1,000 gold pieces just to treat her with basic human dignity. He rode easily, his posture relaxed, occasionally pointing out landmarks or warning her about low branches. He made no demands, asked no questions, and seemed content to let her process what had happened. Finally, she found her voice. Why? What? Why did you pay so much for me? Why are you treating me like ... She struggled for the word. Like I'm not your property. Kai was quiet for so long that Alara wondered if he would answer at all. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a weight that suggested painful memories. Because I know what it's like to be caged, he said, and because no one should have to endure what you've endured, especially not alone. But I am alone, Alara whispered. My family is dead. My village is ash. I have nothing. You have yourself, Kai replied. And that's not nothing. That's everything. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, they crested a hill that revealed a valley below. Nestled among rolling green fields and fruit trees was a modest stone house with smoke rising from its chimney. It looked like something from a dream, peaceful, welcoming, alive with the promise of home. Is that, Alara began? My home, Kai, confirmed our home, if you're willing. She stared at him, confusion and hope warring in her chest. I don't understand. What do you want from me? I want you to be free, he said simply. To choose your own path, make your own decisions, live your own life. I want you to remember what it feels like to be human again. Tears she had been holding back for months finally spilled over. And if I choose to leave, then I'll help you go wherever you want to go, with enough gold to start fresh. And if I choose to stay, Kai's green eyes met hers, and for the first time since the auction, she saw him truly smile. Then I'll consider myself the luckiest man alive. As they rode down into the valley, Alara felt something she had thought lost forever beginning to stir in her chest. It was fragile and uncertain, like a seedling pushing through winter soil. But it was unmistakably real. It was hope. The house was even more beautiful, up close. Ivy climbed the stone walls and flower boxes overflowed with blooms beneath every window. A vegetable garden stretched along one side, heavy with tomatoes and herbs, while fruit trees dotted the landscape like generous guardians. It was the kind of place Alara had dreamed of during her darkest moments in captivity. It's magnificent, she breathed, dismounting her horse with trembling legs. Kai swung down from his stallion with practiced grace. My grandmother's house, he explained, leading both horses toward a small stable. She left it to me when she passed 2 years ago. I've been trying to bring it back to life ever since. An elderly woman emerged from the house, her gray hair pulled back in a neat bun, and her face creased with laugh lines. She wore a simple blue dress and an apron dusted with flour, and her eyes held the same kindness Alara had seen in Kai's. About time you returned, the woman said, embracing Kai warmly. I was beginning to worry. Her gaze shifted to Alara, and instead of the suspicion or judgment Alara expected, she saw only welcome. And you must be the young lady Kai told me about. I'm Marta, his housekeeper and chief warrior. Alara, she managed, still uncertain of her place in this strange new world. Well, Alara, you look half-starved and thoroughly exhausted. Come inside, immediately. I've prepared a room for you, and there's soup warming on the stove. Marta bustled forward with the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. Kai, see to the horses. This poor girl needs food and rest, not your philosophical discussions. For the first time in months, Alara almost smiled. There was something wonderfully normal about being fussed over by a concerned older woman, something that reminded her of her own grandmother's gentle tyranny. The interior of the house was as welcoming as its exterior. Wooden beams stretched across the ceiling, and a fire crackled in the hearth. Books lined the walls, and comfortable furniture invited relaxation. It smelled of herbs and baking bread, and the indefinable scent of home. Your room is upstairs, Marta said, leading her up a narrow staircase. It has a lovely view of the garden, and there's a lock on the door though, I dare say you won't need it here. The room was small but perfect. A bed with a thick quilt dominated one wall, while a window seat looked out over the valley. A wash basin and mirror sat on a small table, and a wooden chest waited for belongings she didn't yet possess. There are clothes in the wardrobe, Marta said gently. They belonged to Kai's grandmother when she was younger. She was about your size, I think. Take whatever you need. Alara ran her fingers over the soft fabric of a green dress, hanging in the wardrobe. It had been so long since she had worn anything but rough sackcloth, that the feeling of quality wool was almost overwhelming. I don't understand, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Why are you both being so kind to me? Marta's expression softened. Because kindness is the most powerful force in the world. Dear one, it can heal wounds that medicine cannot touch and build bridges across the deepest chasms. Kai understands this better than most. But I'm nothing. I'm nobody. I was a slave. You were never a slave, Marta said firmly. You were a person who was enslaved, which is entirely different. Your worth was never determined by your circumstances, and your value isn't measured by what was done to you. You are exactly as precious now as you were the day you were born. That night, Alara lay in the comfortable bed, staring at the ceiling and trying to process the impossible turn her life had taken. Through the window, she could see stars scattered across the sky like diamonds on dark velvet. For the first time in months, she wasn't cold. She wasn't hungry. She wasn't afraid. But she was confused. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new questions, new opportunities to make choices she had forgotten she was capable of making. The thought was both terrifying and exhilarating. Outside her door, she could hear Kai and Marta talking in low voices, their conversation punctuated by the occasional creak of settling wood and the distant hoot of an owl. Their presence was comforting, like a warm blanket around her bruised soul. As sleep finally claimed her, Alara's last thought was a prayer to whatever gods might be listening. Please let this be real. Please let me be worthy of this second chance. Dawn arrived with birdsong and the scent of fresh bread. Alara woke slowly, momentarily disoriented by the softness of her bed and the silence that spoke of safety rather than abandonment. For several heartbeats, she lay still, afraid that movement might shatter the dream and return her to the harsh reality of captivity. But the room remained solid around her, bathed in golden morning light that streamed through the window. She dressed carefully in the green dress she had admired the night before, marveling at how different she looked in the mirror. The hollow-eyed, frightened girl was still there, but she was beginning to be obscured by someone else, someone who stood straighter, whose eyes held a spark of something that might eventually become hope. Downstairs, she found Kai sitting at a wooden table, reading a leather-bound book, while sipping tea from a ceramic mug. He looked up when she entered, and his smile was warm and genuine. "Good morning," he said. "I hope you slept well." "Better than I have in months," Alara admitted, accepting the mug of tea Marta pressed into her hands. "Excellent, I thought, perhaps. Today you might like to see more of the property. Only if you're interested, of course." The casualness of the offer struck her anew. No commands, no expectations, just an invitation she was free to accept or decline. She was still learning to navigate this strange new world where her opinion mattered. "I'd like that," she said. They walked through the gardens first, where Kai showed her the vegetable plots and explained his grandmother's method of companion planting. His knowledge was extensive, but worn lightly, shared with the enthusiasm of someone who genuinely loved the subject rather than someone trying to impress. "She taught me that plants are like people," he said, kneeling to examine a tomato plant. "They thrive when they're in good company, and struggle when they're isolated or surrounded by those who drain their strength." Alara knelt beside him, studying the healthy plants with new eyes. "Is that why you bought me? Because you thought I needed good company?" Kai was quiet for a moment, his hands gentle on the plant's leaves. "I bought you because I saw myself in your eyes," he said. "Finally, the same look I wore when I was young and trapped, and certain that the world was nothing but cruelty. You were enslaved too. Not in the way you were, but trapped nonetheless." He stood, brushing dirt from his hands. "My father was a wealthy merchant who believed children were investments to be managed rather than people to be loved. I spent my youth in a different kind of cage, one made of expectations and demands and the constant threat of disappointment." They walked toward a small grove of apple trees, their branches heavy with fruit. "What changed?" Alara asked. "My grandmother," Kai said simply. "She rescued me when I was 16, brought me here, and taught me what it meant to be free. Not just in body, but in spirit. She showed me that freedom isn't the absence of responsibility, it's the presence of choice. And now you're doing the same for me. I'm offering you the same chance she gave me. What you do with it is entirely up to you." They spent the morning exploring the property, the small orchard, the herb garden, the workshop where Kai crafted furniture and tools, the library where hundreds of books waited to share their secrets. Each space felt like a revelation, a glimpse into a life where purpose and passion intertwined. "I used to help my father with healing," Alara said, as they examined Marta's herb garden. Before everything changed. "I recognize some of these plants. Would you like to help tend them?" Kai asked. "Marta's been complaining that she can't keep up with everything on her own." "I could do that," Alara said. then stopped herself. I mean, if you want me to. If it would be helpful, Ilara, Kai said gently. You don't need my permission to exist. You don't need to earn your place here through usefulness. You matter because you're you, not because of what you can do for others. The concept was so foreign that it took her breath away. She had spent so long being valued only for her labor that the idea of having worth simply by existing seemed impossible to grasp. I don't know how to be that person, she whispered. Then we'll figure it out together, Kai said. Day by day, choice by choice, until you remember who you were always meant to be. That afternoon, Ilara worked in the herb garden while Kai repaired a fence nearby. The work was meditative, her hands remembering skills she had thought lost forever. As she tended the plants, she felt something inside her beginning to unfurl like a flower that had been closed tight against the cold, finally daring to open its petals to the sun. 3 weeks passed in a rhythm of quiet discovery. Ilara threw herself into caring for the herb garden with an intensity that surprised even her. Her knowledge of medicinal plants, dormant for so long, returned in waves of memory and instinct. She found herself creating salves and tinctures, her hands moving with practiced skill as she prepared remedies for common ailments. You have a gift, Marta observed one morning, watching Ilara carefully measure dried chamomile. These preparations are better than anything I could make. My father taught me, Ilara said, then paused, surprised by how easily the words came. For months, she had been unable to speak of her past without pain overwhelming her. Now, though the sadness remained, it was accompanied by something else, gratitude for the knowledge that had survived when everything else was lost. Kai appeared in the doorway, his hair damp with sweat from his morning work in the fields. The village healer, Thomas, mentioned yesterday that his arthritis is troubling him more than usual. Do you think I could make something for him? Ilara said without hesitation. Willow, bark and meadowsweet, with a touch of rosemary for the inflammation. Would you like to visit the village with me today? Kai asked. Thomas would be grateful to meet you, and there are others who could benefit from your skills. The suggestion filled Ilara with equal parts excitement and terror. She had been so comfortable in the cocoon of the farm that the thought of facing strangers again made her stomach clench with anxiety. I don't know, she said. What if they ask questions about where I came from? What if they look at me and they'll see a skilled healer who can help them? Kai said firmly. Nothing more, nothing less. And if anyone treats you with anything other than respect, they'll answer to me. There was something in his tone that made Ilara look at him more carefully. Over the past weeks, she had come to know him as gentle and patient. But she suddenly realized there was steel beneath his kindness. He would protect her, she understood, not because he owned her, but because he cared for her. The village was smaller than she had expected. Perhaps 24 buildings clustered around a central square. People moved about their business with the unhurried pace of those who knew their neighbors and trusted their community. Several waved to Kai as they passed, their faces friendly and curious, when they noticed Ilara at his side. Thomas, the healer, was a man of perhaps 60 years, his fingers gnarled with the arthritis that plagued him. He welcomed them into his small shop with genuine warmth, his eyes lighting up when Kai explained Ilara's background. A healer's daughter, he said, clasping her hands in his weathered ones. I can see the knowledge in your eyes. Would you mind examining my preparations? I fear my old methods may not be as effective as they once were. For the next hour, Ilara lost herself in the familiar world of herbs and remedies. She suggested modifications to Thomas's recipes, demonstrated techniques her father had taught her, and answered questions with growing confidence. It felt like coming home to herself. Remarkable, Thomas said finally. You have a rare gift, my dear. The village could use someone with your skills. On the way home, Kai was quieter than usual. Ilara found herself stealing glances at him, noting the tension in his shoulders and the thoughtful expression on his face. Are you all right? She asked finally. I'm proud of you, he said simply. Watching you with Thomas, seeing how you came alive when you were using your skills. It was beautiful. But Kai smiled ruefully. You know me too well already. I was thinking about how much you've grown since you arrived, how strong you've become, and I found myself wondering, how long it will be before you realize you don't need me anymore. Ilara stopped walking, forcing him to turn and face her. Is that what you think? That I'm only here because I have nowhere else to go? Aren't you? The question hung between them like a challenge. Ilara realized that somewhere in the past weeks, her feelings toward Kai had shifted from gratitude to something deeper, more complex. She had been so focused on healing and growing that she hadn't stopped to examine the way her heart raced when he smiled, or how empty the house felt when he was away. Maybe I was, in the beginning, she said carefully. But that's not why I'm here now. Then why? Because you see me, she said, the words coming from a place of truth she hadn't known she possessed. Not as property or as a project to be fixed, but as a person worth knowing. Because you make me feel like I'm allowed to take up space in the world again. Kai's expression softened. Elara, because I think I'm falling in love with you, she said in a rush, then immediately wanted to take the words back. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said that. I know you rescued me out of kindness, not because you wanted. I've been in love with you since the moment I saw you on that auction block, Kai said quietly, standing there with such dignity despite everything they had done to you. I bought you because I couldn't bear the thought of you belonging to anyone else. But I've been afraid to tell you because I didn't want you to feel obligated. Obligated to return feelings you might not have if circumstances were different. To stay when you might want to leave. To be grateful when you should be free to choose. Elara stepped closer to him, her heart hammering with a mixture of fear and hope. Then let me choose, she said. Let me choose you. The confession changed everything and nothing. Elara still woke in her own room, still worked in the garden, still shared meals with Kai and Marta. But now there was a new awareness between them, glances that lingered, fingers that brushed when passing objects, conversations that carried deeper meaning beneath their surface words. Kai courted her slowly, with the same patience he had shown since her arrival. He brought her wildflowers from his morning walks, shared his favorite books by the fire in the evenings, and listened with genuine interest as she spoke of her dreams and fears. It was courtship in the truest sense, not the pursuit of conquest, but the gentle building of understanding and trust. He's been different since you arrived, Marta confided one afternoon, as they prepared preserves from the orchard's bounty. Happier. More like the boy I remember from before his grandmother died. Before she died, he blamed himself, you know. Thought he should have been able to save her somehow. He's always been one to carry the weight of the world on his shoulders. Marta's hands stilled on the jar she was filling. But with you here, he's started to remember that some burdens are too heavy for one person alone. That evening, Elara found Kai in the workshop, his hands moving with practiced precision as he carved delicate details into a wooden jewelry box. She watched in fascination as vines and flowers took shape beneath his skilled fingers. It's beautiful, she said softly. It's for you, he said without looking up. I started it the day after you arrived. I wanted to give you something that was yours, a loan not borrowed or given out of necessity, but truly yours. Kai, ... She moved closer, studying the intricate work. This must have taken weeks. Time well spent. He finally looked up, his green eyes warm in the lamplight. I carved it from wood from the apple tree where we first talked about freedom. I wanted you to have something that would remind you of that conversation, no matter where life takes you. You still think I'm going to leave? I think you're going to have choices to make, he said carefully. Thomas has been telling people about your skills. There's talk of establishing a proper healing practice in the village. You could have a life there, independence, respect. And you think I should want that more than I want this? More than I want you? Kai set down his carving tools and turned to face her fully. I think you deserve to know all your options before you make any permanent decisions about your future. What if I told you that you're the only future I want? I'd say you're still recovering from trauma, and it's natural to become attached to the person who helped you heal. I'd say you should take time to make sure your feelings are real and not just gratitude dressed up as something else. His careful rationality frustrated her, but she was beginning to understand it was his way of protecting both of them. He had been hurt before. She realized perhaps not in the same way she had been, but hurt nonetheless. He was afraid to trust that something so precious could be real. Then let me prove it to you, she said, stepping closer. Let me show you that what I feel is real. How? Kiss me. The request hung between them like a dare. Kai's eyes searched her face, looking for doubt, for hesitation, for any sign that she was offering something she didn't truly want to give. Are you sure? He asked. Instead of answering with words, Elara rose on her toes and brushed her lips against his. The contact was soft, tentative, but it sent electricity racing through her veins. When she started to pull back, Kai's hands framed her face, holding her gently as he deepened the kiss. It was nothing like the brutal treatment she had endured in captivity. This was reverent, worshipful, a claiming that asked permission rather than taking by force. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. That felt real enough to me, Elara whispered. Elara, Kai said, his voice rough with emotion. I love you. Not because you're grateful, not because you're healing, but because you're you. Because you're strong and brave and kind, and because you make me want to be better than I am. You already are better than you think, she said, her hands resting on his chest, where she could feel the rapid beating of his heart. You're the man who saw someone in chains and chose to set them free. You're the man who gives without expecting anything in return. You're the man who taught me that love doesn't have to hurt. It will never hurt with me, he promised. Not if I can help it. I know, she said simply. That's why I'm choosing you. Not because you saved me, but because you showed me how to save myself. They stood there in the warm lamplight, holding each other and marveling at the strange journey that had brought them together. Outside, the night was full of promise and possibility, and for the first time since her world had been torn apart, Ilara felt truly, completely safe. 3 months into their courtship, the past arrived at their door in the form of Marcus Valerius and 6 armed men. Ilara saw them first, cresting the hill that overlooked the valley, their horses dark silhouettes against the afternoon sky. The sight of Marcus's distinctive red cloak sent ice through her veins. "Kai," she called, her voice barely above a whisper, but carrying enough urgency to bring him running from the stable. He followed her gaze, and his expression hardened. "Get Marta, and go to the root cellar," he said quietly. "Bar the door from the inside, and don't come out until I tell you it's safe. I won't hide while you face them alone." "Ilara, no." She moved to stand beside him, her chin raised in defiance. "I'm not that frightened girl on the auction block anymore. I won't cower while someone else fights my battles." Kai looked as though he wanted to argue, but there was no time. The riders were already approaching the house, their horses' hooves thundering against the packed earth of the yard. Marcus dismounted with theatrical flourish, his cold eyes fixed on Ilara with predatory satisfaction. "Well, well," he said, his voice carrying the smooth menace she remembered from the auction. "The little dove who flew away from her cage. She's not your property," Kai said, stepping slightly forward to shield Ilara with his body. "I paid for her freedom fairly." "You paid for her?" "Yes," Marcus agreed. "But freedom? I think not. You see, I've done some research into your finances, Master Thornfield. Very interesting reading. It seems you've been living quite modestly for a man who can afford to throw away 1,000 gold pieces on a single slave. Get to the point, Valerius. The point is that I believe you've overextended yourself significantly. And since you haven't registered her manumission with the authorities," Marcus smiled coldly, "she's still legally a slave. My slave, since I've decided to invoke the right of seizure for unpaid debts." "What debts?" Ilara demanded, finding her voice despite the fear that threatened to choke her. "Taxes on the original purchase, fees for transportation, boarding costs. While we tracked you down, ... It adds up quickly. I calculate that Master Thornfield here owes me approximately 500 gold pieces, which I'm quite certain he doesn't have." "You're making this up," Kai said. But Ilara could hear the uncertainty in his voice. "Am I the magistrate in town seemed quite convinced by my documentation? In fact, he's given me authority to collect what's owed to me." Marcus gestured to his men, who began to spread out in a loose circle around the house. "I'll take the girl, in lieu of payment, plus ... Let's say 200 gold pieces for my trouble. You have 1 hour to produce the coin, or she comes with me." "No," Ilara said, stepping around Kai to face Marcus directly. "I won't go with you. I'm not property anymore." "Oh, but you are, my dear. You very much are." Marcus's smile was cruel. "And I have such wonderful plans for you. My clients have been quite specific about their requirements, and you'll fetch an excellent price in the eastern markets, assuming you survive the journey. Of course." The threat was clear, and Ilara felt the familiar terror of helplessness rising in her throat. But alongside the fear came something else, a burning anger that surprised her with its intensity. "You want me to go with you?" she said, her voice steady despite the trembling in her hands. "Then you'll have to drag me. I'll fight you every step of the way. I'll escape at the first opportunity. I'll tell everyone I meet what kind of man you are." "You'll do no such thing," Marcus said, his composure cracking slightly. "You'll come quietly, or Master Thornfield here will pay the price for your defiance." "Leave him out of this," Ilara snapped. "Your quarrel is with me." "My quarrel is with anyone who interferes with my business," Marcus replied. "And theft of valuable property is a serious crime. The magistrate might be interested to know that your lover here has been harboring stolen goods." "The only thief here is you," Marta said, appearing in the doorway with a crossbow in her hands. "Stealing people's lives and calling it business." "Careful, old woman," one of Marcus's men warned. "That's a serious weapon you're pointing at us." Yes, it is, Marta agreed pleasantly. And I'm a serious woman who's lived through 3 wars and buried 2 husbands. I'm not particularly concerned about adding a few more graves to my property. The standoff stretched taut between them, each side weighing their options. Ilara's mind raced, searching for a solution that wouldn't end in bloodshed. She had to find a way to protect the people she loved without sacrificing her own freedom. What if I could prove that your documents are fraudulent? She said suddenly. Marcus's eyes narrowed. What are you talking about? I'm talking about the fact that you're a liar and a cheat, and I can prove it. Ilara prayed she was right about the gamble she was about to take. What if I told you that I know exactly who you are, Marcus Valerius, and more importantly, who you're not? Marcus's face went pale, and Ilara knew she had struck a nerve. During her captivity, she had heard whispers among the other slave stories about the man who called himself Marcus Valerius, about his real identity, and the crimes that had forced him to assume a false name. You're not Marcus Valerius, she said, her voice growing stronger with each word. You're Marcus Blackwood, wanted for murder in 3 kingdoms. You killed your business partner in Aldoria and stole his identity, along with his fortune. You're lying, Marcus snarled, but his hand moved instinctively to his sword hilt. Am I? Your men might be interested to know that the real Marcus Valerius has been dead for 5 years. Which means all your contracts, all your legal documents, all your claims to authority are worthless. You have no more right to seize property than any common brigand. One of Marcus's men shifted uncomfortably. Boss, is this true? Of course it's not true, Marcus snapped. She's desperate, making up stories to save herself. Then you won't mind if we send a rider to the capital to verify your identity, Kai said, understanding immediately what Ilara was doing. I'm sure the magistrate would be interested in confirming the legitimacy of your claims. There's no need for that, Marcus said quickly. My documentation speaks for itself. Documentation can be forged, Ilara said, but scars don't lie. The real Marcus Valerius lost 2 fingers on his left hand in a childhood accident. Everyone in the slave trade knows that. Show us your hands, Marcus. The man who called himself Marcus Valerius clenched his fists, his intact fingers clearly visible. Several of his men exchanged glances, doubt creeping into their expressions. This is ridiculous, Marcus said, but his voice had lost its earlier confidence. I don't have to prove anything to you. Actually, you do, said a new voice from behind them. Everyone turned to see Thomas the healer approaching, accompanied by the village magistrate and a dozen armed men from the town guard, especially since these good people sent word that someone was making fraudulent claims in my jurisdiction. The magistrate, a stern-faced woman in her 50s, stepped forward with authority. I am Magistrate Alina Hartwell, and I've been investigating your claims, sir. It seems there are several irregularities in your documentation. What kind of irregularities? Marcus demanded, though he was already backing toward his horse. The kind that suggests forgery. The real Marcus Valerius was known to the Guild of Merchants, and his seal was registered with the crown. The seal on your documents doesn't match the official records. She gestured to her guards. I'm placing you under arrest for fraud, identity theft, and attempting to kidnap a free citizen. She's not free, Marcus shouted, desperation evident in his voice. She's a slave. I bought her. Actually, Kai said, pulling a folded document from his coat. She's been free for 2 months. I registered her manumission the day after I brought her home. The paperwork was processed through proper channels, witnessed by Thomas here, and filed with the regional authority. Ilara stared at him in shock. You freed me. Legally. The moment I realized I was in love with you, Kai said softly. I couldn't bear the thought that you might stay with me because you felt you had no choice. I wanted to make sure you were free to leave if you wanted to. You never told me. Because I didn't want it to influence your decision. I wanted you to choose me because you wanted to, not because you felt obligated. Marcus made a desperate lunge for his horse. But the town guards were ready for him. They surrounded him quickly, binding his hands as he cursed and struggled. Marcus Blackwood, the magistrate, said formally, you are under arrest for the murder of Marcus Valerius, fraud, identity theft, and attempted kidnapping. You'll be held for trial and extradition to Aldoria to face charges there. As Marcus was led away, his men wisely chose not to resist. They had clearly been hired for what they thought was legitimate work, and had no desire to face charges alongside their former employer. Thank you, Ilara said to the magistrate. All of you. I don't know how to repay this kindness. No repayment necessary, Magistrate Hartwell replied. Justice is its own reward. Though, I must say, your knowledge of Marcus Valeris's identifying characteristics was instrumental in exposing the fraud. How did you know about his missing fingers? I heard stories during my captivity, Alara said simply. Information travels quickly among slaves. We learn to pay attention to details that might save our lives. Well, your attention to detail has saved more than just your own life today. Marcus Blackwood was wanted for multiple crimes. There will be a substantial reward from the Crown for his capture. After the officials had left and the excitement had died down, Ilara found herself alone with Kai in the garden. The evening air was cool and sweet with the scent of blooming flowers, and the crisis that had threatened to tear them apart felt like a distant nightmare. You freed me, she said, still trying to process the revelation. Months ago, you freed me. I had to, Kai said simply. How could I claim to love you if I wasn't willing to let you go? And if I had chosen to leave, then I would have helped you build whatever life you wanted, wherever you wanted to build it. Your happiness matters more to me than my own. Allah reached for his hands, threading their fingers together. I've made my choice, she said. I chose you then, and I choose you now, not because I have to, but because I want to. Because I love you. Even after everything that happened today. Even knowing that loving me might mean facing danger. Especially then, she said firmly. Today showed me that we're stronger together than apart. That we can face whatever comes as long as we face it together. 6 months later, the entire village gathered in the meadow behind Kai's house to witness a wedding that had become the stuff of local legend. Word had spread far beyond their small community about the love story that had begun at a slave auction and culminated in the dramatic capture of a wanted criminal. People traveled from neighboring towns to see the couple whose romance had captured imaginations throughout the region. Ilara stood before the village priest in a gown that had belonged to Kai's grandmother. Altered lovingly by Marta's skilled hands, the ivory silk was simple but elegant, embroidered with small flowers that matched the blooms in her bouquet. Her hair was crowned with a wreath of wildflowers, and her face glowed with happiness so radiant that even the most cynical observers found themselves wiping away tears. Kai wore his finest clothes, a dark blue coat that brought out his eyes, crisp white shirt, and leather boots polished to perfection. But it was his expression that drew the most attention. He looked at Ilara as though she were the most precious thing in the world, as though he couldn't quite believe his good fortune. Dearly beloved, the priest began, his voice carrying across the meadow, we are gathered here today to witness the union of two souls who have found in each other not just love, but redemption. The ceremony was simple but deeply meaningful. They had written their own vows, words that spoke of choosing each other not once, but daily, of building a life based on mutual respect and unwavering support. Ilara, Kai said, his voice steady. Despite the emotion in his eyes, you came into my life as a stranger in chains. But you've become my dearest friend, my greatest love, and my truest companion. I promise to honor your strength, cherish your heart, and stand beside you through whatever storms may come. I promise to see you always as the free, beautiful, worthy woman you are. Kai, Ilara replied, her voice clear and strong. You showed me that love doesn't have to hurt, that kindness isn't weakness, and that freedom is a gift to be treasured. I promise to love you, not out of gratitude, but out of choice. I promise to be your partner in all things, to challenge you to grow, and to build with you a life worthy of the second chances we've been given. When the priest pronounced them husband and wife, the cheer that went up from the crowd could be heard for miles. Kai swept Ilara into his arms, spinning her around as she laughed with pure joy. When he set her down, they were both grinning like children. The celebration that followed was magnificent. Tables groaned under the weight of food contributed by the entire village. Musicians played late into the night, and dancers spun beneath lanterns strung between the trees. Thomas the healer gave a toast that had everyone in tears, speaking of the healing power of love and the way two broken souls had made each other whole. To Kai and Ilara he said, raising his glass, who have proven that the greatest treasures in life are not bought with gold, but won with courage, patience, and an open heart. As the night wore on and the guests began to drift away, Ilara found herself standing with Kai at the edge of the celebration, watching their friends and neighbors enjoy themselves. The reward money for capturing Marcus Blackwood had been substantial, but they had used most of it to establish a proper healing center in the village, with Ilara as its chief practitioner. Are you happy? Kai asked, slipping his arm round her waist. Happier than I ever thought possible, she replied, leaning into his warmth. Sometimes I can't believe this is real. That we're real. We're real, he assured her. We're married. We're free, and we're going to build an amazing life together. What kind of life? Whatever kind we want, he said, pressing a kiss to her temple. We'll heal people, grow beautiful things, maybe have children who run through these gardens and know nothing but love. Children, Ilara mused. I'd like that. I'd like to give them the childhood I lost. They'll have that, and more, Kai promised. They'll have parents who chose each other, who fought for their love, and who will fight for them every day of their lives. Marta appeared beside them, tears streaming down her weathered cheeks. I'm so proud of you both, she said, embracing them. You've created something beautiful from something terrible. That's the most powerful magic in the world. As the last guests departed and the lanterns were extinguished, Kai and Ilara walked hand in hand toward their house, their home. The wooden jewelry box he had carved for her sat on the mantelpiece, filled now with wedding gifts and mementos of their journey together. No regrets? Kai asked, as they stood together in the doorway. Only one, Ilara said, and his expression immediately grew concerned. I regret that it took us so long to find each other. We found each other exactly when we were meant to, Kai said, pulling her close. Not a moment sooner, not a moment later. Everything we went through led us to that auction block, to that moment when our eyes met and our lives changed forever. Then I regret nothing, Ilara said, rising on her toes to kiss him. Nothing at all. 5 years later, Ilara stood in the healing center's main room, grinding herbs while keeping one eye on the 2 small children playing nearby. Thomas had retired the previous year, leaving the practice entirely in her capable hands. The center had grown from a simple cottage to a complex of buildings that served not only their village but the entire region. Mama, look. For your... Sarah held up a drawing of a house surrounded by flowers. It's our home. It's beautiful, sweetheart, Ilara said, pausing in her work to admire the colorful crayon masterpiece. Should we hang it in the window so everyone can see it? 2-year-old Marcus named, not for the villain who had once threatened their peace, but for Kai's beloved grandfather toddled over with a wooden horse, clutched in his chubby fist. He was the image of his father, with the same green eyes and gentle spirit, while Sarah had inherited Ilara's dark hair and fierce determination. Where's Papa? Sarah asked, settling beside her mother's workbench. He's in the workshop, making a new cradle for Mrs. Henderson's baby, Ilara explained. He should be finished soon. The door chimed as a customer entered, a young woman with haunted eyes and nervous gestures that Ilara recognized immediately. She had seen that look in her own mirror once, years ago. Can I help you? Ilara asked gently. I heard you help people, the woman said, her voice barely above a whisper. People who have nowhere else to go. What's your name? Anna. I escaped from a bad situation. I don't have any money, but I'm hurt and I don't know where else to turn. Ilara's heart went out to her immediately. Over the years, she and Kai had helped dozens of people fleeing various forms of bondage, some literal slaves, others trapped by debt or abusive relationships. Their home had become an unofficial sanctuary for those seeking freedom. Money isn't important, Ilara said, already reaching for her medical supplies. Let me take a look at your injuries. Children, why don't you go find Papa and tell him we have a guest for dinner? Sarah and Marcus scampered off, their excited voices carrying through the afternoon air. Ilara turned her attention to Anna, treating her wounds with gentle hands and asking no questions about how she had received them. You're safe here, she said as she worked. Whatever you're running from, you don't have to face it alone. I heard stories, Anna whispered, about you and your husband, about how you help people start over. We help people remember that they have value, Ilara corrected, that their past doesn't define their future, that freedom is possible, even when it seems impossible. As she cleaned and bandaged Anna's wounds, Ilara felt the deep satisfaction that came from using her gifts to ease suffering. The healing center had become more than a medical practice. It was a beacon of hope for those who had lost their way. Kai appeared in the doorway, flour dusting his apron from the bread he had been baking. His eyes immediately assessed the situation, and he nodded to Ilara before turning to Anna with a warm smile. Welcome to our home, he said simply. I'm Kai, and I understand you'll be staying for dinner. I hope you like roasted chicken. I don't want to impose, Anna said quickly. It's not an imposition, Kai assured her. We've been where you are. We know what it's like to feel lost and alone. You're welcome here for as long as you need. That evening, as they sat around the dinner table sharing a simple meal, Ilara reflected on the strange journey that had brought them to this point. The scared, broken girl who had stood on the auction block seemed like a character from someone else's story, though she knew that girl still lived within her, transformed by love and purpose. Tell us about the bad man, Mama, Sarah said suddenly, causing both adults to freeze. What bad man, sweetheart? Alara asked carefully. The one who tried to take you away. Marta told me about him when she was telling stories. Kai and Alara exchanged glances. They had always planned to tell their children about their origins when they were old enough to understand, but they hadn't expected the conversation to come so soon. There was a man who wanted to hurt Mama, Kai said carefully. But Papa and Mama and all our friends worked together to stop him. He can't hurt anyone anymore. Did you save Mama? Sarah asked, her eyes wide with fascination. Actually, said, we saved each other. That's what people do when they love each other. They help each other be brave and strong. Like how we help Anna, Marcus asked, his toddler's pronunciation making the name sound like Anna. Exactly like that, Elora said, smiling at her son's innocent wisdom. We help people because someone once helped us. Later that night, after the children were asleep and Anna had been settled in the guest room, Elora and Kai sat together on the porch swing, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't been at that auction? Alara asked. Never, Kai said immediately. I was meant to be there. We were meant to find each other. Everything else is just details. Even the pain, the fear, the time we lost. Especially that, Kai said, pulling her closer. Without the darkness, we wouldn't appreciate the light. Without the pain, we wouldn't recognize the healing. Without the fear, we wouldn't treasure the safety. You sound like a philosopher. I sound like a man who's learned that love is the most powerful force in the universe. It can transform the worst experiences into the foundation for something beautiful. Is that what we are? Something beautiful. We're proof that redemption is possible, Kai said. We're proof that love can triumph over cruelty, that freedom can overcome bondage, that hope can survive even the darkest night. Alara leaned against her husband's shoulder, feeling the steady rhythm of his breathing and the warmth of his love surrounding her like a shield. In the distance, she could hear the soft sounds of their children sleeping peacefully, secure in the knowledge that they were loved and protected. I love you, she whispered into the darkness. I love you too, he replied. Yesterday, today, tomorrow, and all the days after that. In this life, and whatever comes next. Promise me something, Alara said. Anything. Promise me we'll keep helping people like Anna. Promise me we'll keep being the answer to someone's prayers. I promise, Kai said solemnly. We'll keep paying forward the gift we were given. We'll keep proving that freedom is possible, that love can heal, and that every person deserves a chance at happiness, even if it's dangerous, even if it costs us. Especially then, Kai said. Because we know what it's like to need saving. We know what it's like to stand on an auction block and wonder if anyone in the world cares whether we live or die. And we know what it's like to be saved by love, the most powerful force in the universe. Kai agreed, as they sat together in the peaceful darkness. Surrounded by the life they had built from the ashes of their separate tragedies, Elora felt a deep sense of completion. She had been a healer's daughter, a captive, a slave, a free woman, a wife, and a mother. But above all, she had been loved truly, deeply, completely loved by a man who had seen her worth when she couldn't see it herself. Their story had begun with chains and fear, but it had become something magnificent, a testament to the power of choice, the strength of love, and the possibility of redemption. They had taken their pain and transformed it into purpose, their scars into sources of strength, their broken pieces into a beautiful whole dot. And every day, as they helped others find their way from darkness to light, they proved that the most powerful words in any language are not, I own you or you belong to me, but rather, you are free and you are loved. In the end, that was their legacy, not the gold they had accumulated or the buildings they had constructed, but the lives they had touched, the hope they had kindled, and the love they had shared. It was a legacy that would outlast them both, rippling outward through the generations like stones thrown into still water, creating endless circles of healing and hope. And it all began with a quiet stranger who raised his hand at an auction and chose love over indifference, freedom over profit, and hope over despair. It began with a single moment of courage that changed lives forever and continued to change lives long after the original actors had left the stage. The greatest love stories, after all, are not the ones that end with happily ever after, but the ones that begin with once upon a time. Someone chose to care. Author's note. This story explores themes of redemption, healing, and the transformative power of love, While it deals with difficult subjects, including slavery and human trafficking, it ultimately celebrates the human capacity for growth, healing, and creating meaning from suffering. The true satisfaction comes not from the rescue itself, but from the character's journey toward becoming whole people who use their experiences to help others find freedom and hope.